Good morning, everybody. Great to be here. I hope you've had a wonderful weekend. It's certainly been warm. At least it has here. If you're just dropping in, please do make sure you come in and say hello in the chat. If you're on Facebook, that's in the comment section just below this video. If you're on YouTube, that's over here in the chat section, assuming you're on a computer. It might be somewhere different if you're on a mobile device or a tablet, but it will be there. You can either comment or chat. Whichever it is, come in, leave me a message, say hello, say you've arrived, like Cyril, hi, thank you. John, great to have you here this morning. Great to hear you. Graham, lovely to see you. Carl, morning. Roy, morning. Thank you for joining me this morning. This morning is going to be great. I'm really, really excited about what we're going to be going through. And I'm going to get started in just 1 second. But before I do that, I want to make sure you've got a piece of paper, please. Make sure you've got a piece of paper and a pen. Grab a pen, a piece of paper. I'd like you to take some notes because what I'm going to go through today it could change the way you look at horse racing. Because I want to tackle something. I'm going to go on the attack here. I'm going to go on the attack this morning. I'm going to challenge you to how you may be already doing something. I'm going to try and get you to change your mind. That's my aim this morning. My aim is to challenge you on the way you are probably doing something when you look at horse racing, and then to change your mind. That's what I'm going to do. Morning, Samitra. Morning, Cindy. Chris, hi. Great to see you here this morning, Chris. Paul, lovely to see you. John, Phil, great to have you here. Thank you so much for joining. Bazinga1788, how are you doing? It's lovely to have you here. So that's what I am putting to you this morning. It is a challenge. Okay, now I'm going to get started and let me see if I can get you to change the way you look at this. Okay, here we go. Let me sort the screens out. Other way. Hang on. There we go. I never get it right first time. Okay, here we go. So placing bets before you know which horse you fancy and why you should never do it. Now, seriously, everybody does this. Everybody does this. Everybody places bets before they know which horse they fancy. And that may make no sense at the moment, but it's about to. Because what I'm going to cover is why you choose a bet before a horse and how it's costing you a fortune. And then I'm going to jump into a live example of what I'm actually talking about here. Okay? So these are the 3 main points that we're going to be covering this morning. And hi to all those people who have just joined. Thank you so much for joining this morning. Make sure you drop a message and say hello. On Facebook, that's the comment. In YouTube, that's the chat just over here. Wherever you are, whichever platform you're on, please leave me a message. Say hi, say you've joined, because I am challenging you this morning to change how you look at your horse racing. And if you're enjoying what you're doing, don't forget to hit that like button. Okay, so this is what we're going to be covering. Why you choose a bet before the horse and how it is costing you a fortune. Then I'm going to jump into a live example and show you actually what we're going to do and how I'm going to try and change your mind. So first of all, I want to start with why you choose a bet before a horse. And unfortunately, my face is covering the bottom of that text. But what it says is why you choose a bet before a horse. Okay. Hi, Batman. Thank you so much for joining. Great to have you here. So this is the thing. Okay, this is the thing. And I want you to think right now. I want you to think about if you've ever done this. And then I want you to think, and I want you to be honest with yourself. I want you to be really honest with yourself. I want you to think about if you still do it. Okay, so I want you to think about if you've ever done it first. And then once you've done that, think about if you still do it. Because honestly, almost every single horse racing fan I meet does this. Almost every single one does this. Okay. And what they do, what you do, what I've done, okay, what we've all done is we choose a bet type and build a system around it. Now, just leave me a quick message. Leave me a quick message in the comments or the chat or whatever platform you're on. Leave me a quick message if you've ever chosen a bet type, and by that I mean a back bet, a lay bet, a place bet, a Dutch bet, place day, whatever it may be, trifecta, place bet, whatever, it doesn't matter. Whether you have ever chosen a bet type and then gone away to build a system around it. Drop me a message now. Drop me a message right now, either in the comments if you're on Facebook, in the chat over here, if you're on YouTube, wherever you are, whatever platform you're on, drop me a message right now and just say yes or no. Yes, if you have ever done that before. No, if you have never done that before. And what I'm asking is, have you ever chosen a bet type, like a back bet, a place bet, a lay bet, whatever it might be, an exotic bet, it doesn't matter, and then gone away to try and build a system to that bet type? Drop that message in right now. Morning, Andy. Thank you so much for joining. Kip1471. Thank you very, very much for joining. Okay, we've got some people coming back in, and thank you for being honest. Be honest here. Be honest. Okay, it doesn't matter. There's no judgment. No one cares. No one's going to judge you for your answer here. It doesn't matter, because we're all here to learn. We're all here to improve. So drop that message in right now. If you have ever chosen a bet type, like a back, a lay, a place, a Dutch, an exotic, a trifecta, a forecast, whatever, it doesn't matter. If you've ever chosen a bet type and then gone away and built a system around it, drop a yes right now below. Okay, right now below. And if you haven't done that, put a no in. That's fine. It's cool if you haven't done it, but put a no in. But I would say every single horse racing fan that I've ever met would be answering yes to this question. Phil Kappa is a no. Congratulations, Phil. If I had an award, I would like to give you one. Cindy, Louise, yes. Both of you, Louise. Carl, yes. Graham, maybe. Kip1471, no. John Waters, yes. John, yes, but low risk approach, so I restrict myself to 80-20 or Dutch bets. Okay, John, I'm going to come back to that. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. Keep those coming in, okay? Because the majority of you are saying yes. So if you have done this, you are in good company. I'm just going to open the window here a bit. If you're saying yes, you are in good company. You are not on your own. There isn't really a right or a wrong answer here. This is more an understanding of yourself, how you bet, how you analyze a horse race, okay? This is more understanding yourself so that we can take that understanding and progress it to the next stage where actually we can do better in what we want to achieve when it comes to horse racing. So that's the reason for asking this. Sumitra is a yes. Paul's a no. Roy's a yes. Okay. Now, I'll tell you why most of us are doing this. And those of you who said no, that is great. That is, I cannot tell you how wonderful it is to see a few people saying no. That's absolutely brilliant. Okay. But the reason most of us do this, and I've done this, and to this day I still sometimes find myself doing. I'm not infallible here at all. So I do this too. But the reason that we do this, okay, the reason that we do this is because we are taught to find. In fact, I can hide this slide for a second. Let me just hide this slide for a second. Okay, the reason that we do this is because we are taught wrongly how to bet. All the information that is out there, all the stuff on Google, all the stuff that we find, most of it is wrong when it comes to how to find profitable bets. Most of it is wrong. Okay. And wherever you go, people are like, well, first of all, determine your bet type, like your back bet type. You see that if I went on Google now and Google, I don't know, how to build a horse racing system or something like that, it would say, well, choose a bet type. And then when you've chosen a bet type, do X, Y, and Z. But that's wrong. That's wrong. We shouldn't be taught that we need to find a bet type that we are comfortable with first, and then focus on finding success with that. That is the wrong way to analyze a horse race. Okay, that is the wrong way to analyze a horse race, and it will be costing you a fortune, which I'm going to come to in just a second. Okay, so let's hang on. Oh, I've got to bring the slides back. Let me just come back over to here now. Whichever button I press, I get it the wrong way around. Okay. Now, if you have ever done this, if you still do this, okay, if you still do this, it is honestly costing you a fortune. Okay, it is honestly costing you a fortune in bets, in stake money, and here's why. Here's why. Everything to do with horse racing, in fact, everything to do with betting, sports betting specifically here, everything to do with sports betting is about risk versus return. That's it. Those are the three words. Those are the only three words that have any meaning if you want to be profitable when it comes to sports betting. Okay? Risk versus return. That's it. There is nothing more else. Whenever we place a bet on a horse race, we are risking our money. And we're risking our money for the chance of a good return. And the way we determine if that return is good is the likelihood of our bet winning or losing. Now, we don't know if it's going to win or lose in a race, but when we place that bet, we have ascertained that the risk of placing that bet is worth it for the return that we will get if we're correct. Okay, let me do that again, because that's a lot of words. Okay, the risk. When we place a bet on a horse race, sorry, stumbled over my words. When we place a bet on a horse race, it is all about accepting that the risk of placing that bet and losing that money is worth it for the potential return we'll get if we are right. That's it. That's the whole kit and caboodle. That is everything. That is the whole ball of knowledge just there. That's what it's about. And when we actually soak that in, when we really truly understand that on like another level, not just on a kind of a word based, like, oh yeah, I get that. That makes sense. When we've actually understood it, like I guess it would be mentally deeply, like, oh, we have accepted it and it becomes a part of our analysis, it becomes a part of our process. When we've done that, your betting changes, completely changes. Everything that you are doing changes. Okay, now the reason for that is because you cannot know. It is impossible to know the best way to bet on a horse until you've got all the information. Okay, I'm going to pull back from that quickly. It is impossible to know the best way to bet on a horse before you've got all of that information about the horse. You cannot determine the bet type until you know the risk associated with betting on the horse. And you cannot know the risk associated with betting on the horse until you know the odds of the horse, because that's telling you what's coming back. Morning to the group of people who've just come in. Hi, Raul. Hi, Dennis. Thank you so much for joining. If you've joined as well, you've not left me a message, please leave me a message. Just drop it in to the comments if you're on Facebook, to the chat over here if you're on YouTube. Just say hi. It's lovely to say hi. It's lovely to talk to you. John, is this actual versus expected? No, it's not. A great question from John Waters. You won't see that if you're on Facebook because he's over on YouTube. But John has just asked, am I talking about actual versus expected? And the answer is no, I'm not. I'm not talking about that here. That has relevance because that's actually about long-term advantage. But what I'm talking about here, I'm talking about the fact that we cannot choose a bet type. We cannot choose a bet type until we know the risk of a horse winning or losing, until we've assessed that risk, and until we know the odds of placing the bet. Because we all know the odds differ from bookmaker to bookmaker. We all know the odds are different in different markets. You know, the win market is very different from the place market. If you Dutch bet a horse in the win market, it's very different returns from betting a single in the win market. Each way is different again. The increased place markets, like the 4 place to 5 place, even the 6 place markets are different again. The shorter markets, like you can get 3 place races where you can bet in a 2 place market. Again, odds are different again. AVB markets, trifectas, forecasts, the endless amounts of markets that bookmakers have made to try and get us to risk our money with them without truly understanding whether it is worth the risk or not. Bookmakers try and bamboozle people with complex bets that promise high returns, you know, like 350 to 1 or 60,000 to 1 in some cases, like whatever it is. Bookmakers create these markets to try and bamboozle bettors into thinking they could win huge amounts without truly understanding the risk of placing that bet in comparison to the return we may get. Okay. So why do we do this as bettors? Why do we determine a bet type first? Why do we go, do you know what? I am going to learn how to bet horses to win. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a system to bet horses to win. Or I'm risk adverse, so I want a system to place horses or Dutch horses or whatever. Or I love the possible high return, so I'm going to try and figure out a place pot system. We all do that. But when you do that, you're not giving yourself the space to find the best market to bet in for that race. Because every race is going to have different levels of risk, okay? Every single race is going to have different levels of risk. Sometimes there's a horse that's really, really strong, and sometimes there are no really strong horses, you know? Sometimes you may have a really weak favorite for some reason. Every race is going to be different, which means the risk of betting in every race is going to be different. And we have to balance this risk out. We have to balance this risk out. But in order to be able to balance it out, in order to make the best decision, we have to give ourselves the space to find the best market to bet in. And we can't find the best market to bet in. I can actually hide this slide again. We can't find the best market to bet in without knowing all of the information that we need to bet. Good morning, Stu. Good morning, Sunil. Hi, Andy. Hi, Don. Thank you very, very much for joining us. And I've got a great question here from John Bell, but I'm going to come back to that question in a minute. Okay. So I want you to start giving yourself, I want you to do this, and I'd like you to do it from today. Okay. I'd like you to do it from today. I'd like you to start giving yourself the space to be able to find the best market to bet in. And this means radically changing, possibly. It possibly means radically changing the way you bet. And the good news here is if you've got a betting system, if you've got a system that you like to follow, a strategy or a structure that you like to follow, you don't have to get rid of it. You can still use that structure. That is fine. But I'm going to ask you to step out of a box. I'm going to ask you to look at something slightly differently. And I promise you it's going to change the way you look at horse racing. Okay, I promise you it's going to change the way you look at horse racing. So how do we do this? Now, the first way that we can do this is the most obvious way, and that is we just open a race card or a race paper if you still use the paper, but we open a race card and we start looking at all the horses and we do a cross comparison. But you'll know if you've been following the Race Advisor for any period of time, that's not what we recommend. That's not what I recommend, because there are too many variables. There is too much going on. It kind of, you get your mind just gets filled, and like it just kind of goes poof, like there's too much to compare. Pardon me. So I don't recommend doing that. I recommend you start with contenders. And when we start with contenders, by definition, we've got a systematic process to find them. And if we've got a systematic process to find them, no one's put it in the chat yet, but I can imagine you shouting it at me. I can imagine you shouting it at me saying, but if I've got a systematic process to find, I have to build the systematic process around a bet type. I mean, even Race Advisor Pro in the system builder you've got to choose a bet type in the settings. Well, you're absolutely right. You do, because without choosing a bet type, we can't provide any results when we're creating a systematic process. And this is the foundation of where we start to go wrong. Because in order to look at results historically, we have to decide a bet type first, because otherwise we've got nothing to calculate those results on. And then that just follows through. We take that through all the way. But actually what we've done here is we've decided the bet type before even knowing whether the horse we're looking at, before we know whether the horse we're looking at, what level of risk is associated with betting on that horse, or what the odds are of getting it back. So what do we do? Okay, so here's what we do. We can still start with that structure. That's absolutely fine. We can start with that structure. Okay? But then we've got to walk outside the box. And we've got to look back in the box. afterwards. So let's say we have a structure of finding contenders based on back bets. We've pigeonholed this into back bets. Now, the whole point about a contender is it's a potentially strong horse in the race. But we found that strong horse systematically. We found it using a systematic approach. And we've now got to go in and actually see whether it has a strong chance or what the risk of that horse is in the context of the race with the other runners of the race. Because the problem with systems is they are predominantly based on a horse and race conditions, specific horse and race conditions. They do not, generally speaking, consider the other runners in the race. And you may say here, well, but I'm looking for like the top ranked or the second top ranked. So by definition, that is considering the other runners in the race. And the answer is yes, it is, to a degree. To a degree. But that's also dependent on how the rating is made. How the rating that the horse is top ranked for is made. And whether that rating considers other horses in its calculations or not. Because if it doesn't, it's not really a direct comparison. So that's the biggest issue with systematic processes, which is why we only use it to find contenders, why we only use it to highlight potentially strong horses. But just because we've highlighted potentially strong horse does not mean the horse is going to win the race. And it does not mean just because our contender strategy in this example is for back bets, it does not mean that is the best way to bet that horse. Because at the point of having that contender, we don't yet know the full risk level of placing a bet on that horse in comparison to the other runners. And if you're a Race of Miser Pro member or you're part of Launchpad, you'll know about the FMFR method. That's what we then use to determine that risk. But we have to determine that risk. And even when we've determined that risk, we still do not know whether it should be a back bet, a lay bet, a place bet, whether we should put other horses in. We don't know that yet. We've got to go and check the odds first. We've got to go and check the odds first, because until we check the odds, even if we know what risk we think the horse has of winning or losing, until we check the odds, and I apologize for the building noise that you can hear in the background, but it is so hot today, I can't shut the window. So I do apologize for that. But even if we have assessed the risk level of a horse, at this point, we still don't know what is the best way to bet. Because let's say we think a horse is super strong. This horse is the most likely horse to win in the race. And we get to the market and the horse's odds of 1.1. It might be the super strong horse. It might be the strongest horse in the race. But is the risk of placing the bet on it, despite it being that strong, worth the return of 10 pence to the pound? And that's the ultimate question that we have to ask ourselves before we place any bet. Is the risk worth the reward? And we might go, no, it's not. But then we might drop over to the place market and find that that same horse that is 1.1 in the win market is only 1.08 in the place market. 3 to place. Because actually, who the heck wants to bet a horse in the place market that's only 1.1 in the win market? I can tell you, not many people. But actually, in terms of risk versus reward, it would be far better to bet that horse in the place market. Far, far better. Far better risk versus reward. That's what we have to focus on. We have to focus on that. Okay. And you have to give yourself the space to be able to find the best market to bet in. You have to give yourself the space to be able to determine the best way to bet to get the right risk versus return for you. Now, some of you may have a higher risk level, happier to take bigger risks for potentially bigger returns. Others may be more like me, happy to take smaller risks for smaller returns. Everybody's going to be slightly different. But it starts with these two pieces of information. What is the risk of this horse winning or losing the race? And what is the potential return? And just because we've got a strategy that finds contenders, that focuses on back bets, when we jump in and when we do that risk, we do not have to bet the horse to win. We could still lay it to lose. And I've done that. You may have seen me do that before on live streams. You may have seen me go, well, I thought this horse would be good to win, but now I've jumped into the market and I've looked at a couple of the other runners. I'm going, actually, I still think this horse is possibly got a great chance of winning, but the odds aren't worth it. The return is not worth it. However, because the odds are so low, I'd rather lay this horse, because actually the risk of it winning, if I placed a lay bet, is still worth the return I would get. Like if it doesn't win, that return that I'm getting from laying is actually better. Yet I started thinking I was going to bet this horse to win because it came from a back to a win contender process. So whatever that contender process is, whatever bet type you've built it around, and we have to build them around bet types. Unfortunately, we cannot get away from that if we want to shortlist. We cannot get away from that. We have to build them around bet types, because we've got to get statistics. And to get statistics, we have to simulate placing a bet to get the numbers. But we don't have to follow that for the horse. We are just highlighting horses that should be strong or potentially weak or whatever. Then we jump in and we actually figure out the risk for ourselves. Okay, I'm going to come back. There's a couple of questions in here. I'm going to come back and going to answer those questions now. And then I'm going to jump into a live example of exactly what the heck I'm talking about here. So if this is bamboozled you a bit, okay? If this is apologies. If this has bamboozled you for a bit, okay? If this has bamboozled you for a bit, ask a question right now. Please ask that question right now, okay? And I'm going to come and answer them. Then I'm going to jump in and do something live so you can see it actually taking place before your eyes. What the heck I'm talking about here. Okay, let's come and look at some questions. Does that mean you should select the horses you are interested in without looking at the odds? Yes. Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I am super hot here. I don't know whether it's hot where you are, but here it is like an absolute sauna. And it's only 11:30. It's going to be scorching today. So John is asking, does that mean you should select horses that you are interested in without looking at the odds? Yes, that is always my preference. Now, the only time when I would differ from this is when I'm trying to eliminate horses that I wouldn't want to bet on. I'm trying to do it fast. So I personally don't bet above 29-1. So I will go in and any horse that's say 35 plus. And the reason I go 35 on the odds rather than 30 is because odds move. So I just give a bit of leeway. But and I will go in and remove those. But I'm not really focusing on the odds at that point. I'm just looking to eliminate horses. I'm not using those odds. Then I always make my decision. I suppose this isn't selecting. I'd like to change your terminology around here a little bit, John, because I would say I would analyze the horses before considering the odds. I would analyze the horses before considering odds. But at that point, I've still not selected anything, because to me, a selection is a horse I'm going to place a bet on. At this point, I've just got contenders, and I'm analyzing those contenders without looking at the odds. I am not making my final decisions on a selection until I have all the information, which includes the results of that analysis and the odds in the different markets. So those are the two things that I need to be able to use in order to actually determine the bet. Coming down here. Okay, this is another question actually from John. So I'm going to put that up here quickly because it's a great question. If you've got a question, drop it in. There's a couple more, and then I will come back to you. Okay, so John, if you systematically build a race tissue, you are not determining bet type. No, you shouldn't be determining bet type. You should be determining risk. Now, the risk may be what the risk is, whether the risk of the horse winning or losing. When we systematically build a race tissue, we are determining risk. We are determining probability. We are determining what is the percentage chance of this horse winning and what is the percentage chance of this horse losing. That's what the race tissue is. It's not bet type. It should not be bet type in that example. Now, If you're building that tissue systematically, and I say this because I know a little bit about how you're building your tissue, if you're building your tissue systematically and you are using stats of results to do it dynamically, then to a degree you are, but you're still not actually determining bet type. You are still determining risk based on probability. And you could flip that tissue around on its head. So you may be, and in the same way for systems, when we are finding contender structures and strategies, we are using a bet type, say back to win, to get results, to be able to help us develop that portion of it, that systematic approach. In the same way, if you're doing that with a race tissue, and if you're not sure what a race tissue is, that's an odds line. That's your own odds line. That's creating your own odds for a race. Then if you're doing that, you may be using a bet type such as back to win to determine that level of risk. But what you should be ending up with is probability, risk. Now it doesn't matter how you use it. Back, lay, place, it doesn't matter. You can convert your tissue, your odds line into place odds, etc. I hope that makes sense. Only 16 degrees up north. Good Lord. Wow. I mean, I can't complain. I love the heat. But I think it's about 28 here already, or 27. So there we go. Okay, great question here from John. I've got over 40 systems currently in use, and today they produce 51 selections. There aren't enough hours in the day to use FMFR for all of these. That is a great question, John. And I put that on the screen because I think there's going to be a lot of people in that position, and I want to come back to that at the end. Okay, so I'm going to come back to that at the end. Route 73, is it not just easier to use tipsters? And my question to you, Route 73, is have you had long-term success using tipsters? How many tipsters are you with now that you started with 5 years ago, or 6 years ago, or 7 years ago, that are still making you year-on-year profits? Raul, you can ask a question related to the website, but I'll come back to it at the end. Just coming down the last two messages here before we're going to jump over to a live example. Okay. For the off. That's fine. Okay, that's it. We've got no more questions, so I'm going to jump over to a live example, and I want to come back to the systems because I know this has brought up some interest across the chat here about whether John, who's got a lot of systems, whether it's too many, whether he should drop some, and of course, ultimately that's up to John. But I'd like to comment on that because actually, there are some good messages here, and I'd like to clarify something because I don't want that to be confusing. So I'm going to clarify that, but I'll do that at the end. So please stay with me till the end on that about lots of systems. If you use lots of systems, like John, if you have a lot of systems in play and you can't analyze them one by one, I'm going to talk to you about that before we finish. I'm going to talk to you about whether you should remove any, whether you should keep some, whether it's too, there is such a thing as too many. And by the way, John, heads up, I know someone that runs 500 systems a day. Okay. So, I'm going to come back to that. And Paul, who has said tipsters all use systems and they're quite lazy. In my experience, that's also quite accurate. But we're going to come back here. Okay, so now I'm going to come over. I'm going to come over now to some race cards. Just going to find my race cards. Bear with me a second. And we're going to do a live example. Okay, so let me bring this up. Have I got it the right way? I did. I got it the right way. Excellent. Okay, so we're going to choose a race, but I'm going to start with a contender because I feel that that's a better way of doing it here, okay? So I'm going to start with, let's do this one here. 5'10", Kilbeggan, Shanwala. Okay, here's a contender. 5'10", Kilbeggan, Shanwala. This is a, actually, I don't remember. Let me just double check that. I was about to say it's a back contender, but I want to make sure because it could potentially be a place contender, but I'm pretty sure it's a back contender. Let me just double check. It is a back contender. Excellent. Okay. Shanwala here. Okay. Back contender. And this could be a nice example here. Okay, this could be a nice example. Let's have a look at this race. Now, Risk versus return. That's what I want you to keep in your mind. That's what I want you to keep in your mind while we go through this race. Okay, now I am going to sort here by odds quickly, and I'm going to remove, like I mentioned to John, I'm just going to remove these high odds horses, 100, 110. Not interested in them. And that puts Shanwala at the bottom, but that's fine. I'm okay with that. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take account of everything we've got here. Hurdle turf. Good to yielding, 3 mile race, 11.5 grand prize money up here. Okay, 11.5 grand prize money. And I can see some questions coming in here. What race card? These are Race Advisor Pro race cards. Okay, these are Race Advisor Pro race cards. These are the race cards I use, obviously, because that's our software. If you're not a member, you can join by going to raceadvisor.co.uk/join. That's where you can go and get that now if you want to, if you're interested. But those are the race cards that I'm using here. Okay, this is what we've got here. Now, I'm just going to run through an analysis of this. I've been told by a contender process that Shanwala is potentially offering value, potentially a strong horse, potentially stronger than the market may otherwise consider. Now, this particular contender process is based, I believe, on pace specifically. I will double check that. Yep, it's based on pace. Okay, pace in these races. So I'm actually just going to start here by looking at the pace. And we can see that this horse is pretty much going to be mid-pack. The predicted race pace is true. Okay. And so now it depends on whether this horse has enough pace to set it up in the right position, because leaders early presses generally win true run races. So if this race is actually true run, we're going to have this horse in the middle that runs well. And we got 2 horses like to be at the front. And then we got these 2 horses like to be just behind him. So actually, this horse could be well positioned for the pace in this race. And the running style that we have here in the right-hand column is mid-pack. And that's the horse's preferred running style. So it's going to be in a position that it likes. Okay, it's going to be in a position that it likes. So I'm just going to hide that now for a second. Now, I'm actually going to do a quick analysis of this race as well. I'm not just going to go and use the FMFR. I'm actually going to do a very quick analysis of this race, because I really want you to understand how we bring about risk. Okay, how we analyze risk. I really, really want you to understand how we do that. Okay, so what we've got here. First of all, big thing I noticed in this DSLGR column. If you're not a Race Advisor Pro member, you probably may not have heard of this. This means days since last good race. Now, the days since last good race here, okay, the days since last good race is 577. That's not good. Okay, that's really not good. However, we do notice the horse hasn't run since season break, but we're going to come back to that. But there is a big flag of concern. Okay. Then we've got a speed factor, which the horse is kind of near the top at. We've got a prize money factor, earnings based, the horse is near the top at. We've got a competitive form type factor, the horse is near the top at. We've got a collateral form type factor. Again, the horse is near the top at. So all these things look pretty good. If I drop over to a slightly different race card here, which has got just a few more factors on, and you can see I'm not digging into this massively deeply. I'm just trying from different points of view. I'm trying from form, from class, from earnings, to get a picture of how this horse compares to other runners in the race. What is the risk of this horse winning, or what is the risk of this horse losing comparatively to other runners in the race? Okay, that's what I'm looking for. Consistency, pretty low. Bit of a concern, along with Dason's last good race. Projected speed in this race, mid. That's fine for a 3-mile race. You do not want a horse to be projected to be the fastest, generally speaking, in a 3-mile race. Okay, and actually we can see the one that's projected to be the fastest is wrong direction, which also has projected to be the best, the leading pace position. So there's a high chance wrong direction may tire itself out. These little pieces of information are really good. Okay. Speed average on the ground, sort of middle of the field again. Speed average over the distance, middle of the field again. 5.278. This is a Race Advisor's kind of like summary rating. One of our summary. I call them compiled ratings because they contain other ratings in them. and it's in the top 4, which is a very good sign. Days since last win, 642. Another concerning point there. That these two things, days since last good race, 577. Days since last win, 642. These add to our risk of betting on this horse if we are to bet on this horse to win. 6% win strike rate. This adds to the risk of us betting on this horse. Look at these PFP, LR, LR2, LR3. That's these figures here. Continuously declining. Another concern, adds to our risk again. Okay. Particularly when we see the others here, generally improving. So there are definitely risk levels associated with this horse. What I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back over to the chat. I'm going to see if you've got any questions while I run this Monte Carlo simulation. And then I'm going to come back. Okay. Let's see. If you've got any questions, drop them in now. Let's come back here and have a look. Hi, John. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you. Graham fired off all his tipsters. John talking about his systems. Thank you for sharing that information. Phil, I've used and ditched many tipsters, but there is one I still follow after 5 years. Congratulations on finding one, Phil. That's absolutely awesome. Frank, what do I think is an acceptable rate of return for a system? Now, I want to be clear here. System is very different to what we're doing here. When you say system to me, Frank, I am assuming you mean a fully systematic process, one that requires no analysis by ourselves of the risk. Let's be clear on that. That's what I understand by system, okay? And an acceptable rate of return for a system. My bottom line generally on anything is 5%, but for fully systematic processes, usually you'll find it's lower. Or it is significantly higher, but the potential for that edge and that return to drop rapidly is huge. Okay, it's huge. So there isn't a single answer here. But the answer that I'll give is that for me, a 5% return on investment, that's a return on your turnover, not an annual return like you get from a bank. That's a return on turnover, return on every bet on average, 5%. That is a phenomenal rate of return if you're betting multiple horses a day. And one of the mistakes a lot of bettors make is they're looking for this 20%, 30%, 80%, 100% rates of return. These are unachievable, generally speaking, long term. Okay? 5% rate of return will beat almost any other form of investment you can find. If you can do that consistently, year on year, and again, this is year on year stuff. This is not month to month stuff. Okay. You cannot look at a rate of return in horse racing week to week or month to month. You have to look at it the same way you would look at any investment year on year. And you would do that if it was stocks, shares, money in the bank, property, anything else you would put your money in, you would look at your rate of return year on year. If you've made a 5% return on turnover, so an average of 5% on every bet you've placed throughout a year, and you can do that year on year, you will beat almost anything else you can invest your money in. Okay. Right, coming down here. A couple more questions. Will you be doing any race analysis for Ascot from Carl? Actually, great question, Carl. I am planning on doing one on Saturday. On Friday for Saturday races. I'm planning on doing a live stream for Ascot for Saturday's races. I'm going to be putting up a post on our page to get a vote for which race you would like me to dig into. So that's going to be coming probably later today, possibly tomorrow morning. Is this process you use to identify the contenders for launch? For launch, John. Similar. Is this the process I use to identify contenders for launchpad? It is similar. Yes. Right. And Raul, I can see you've got an issue with the videos in our members area. I did get your ticket on that, and I did reply to your ticket. So if you haven't, please, if you haven't got that reply, please send me in another message, because I did reply to that ticket. Okay, right. Let's come back and have another look at where we're at here. So I've just run this Monte Carlo simulation. I'm going to come in. I'm going to sort in order of results now. Meticulous, and again, I'm just going to eyeball it here. I'm not even going to go into much detail. Eyeball it. Shanwala is not looking good. That adds to the risk. That's simple, okay? That's simple. Now I'm going to look at we're going to look at the horse's individual form, okay? And I'm just looking at this one horse. So far, I've looked at this one horse in comparison to the other runners in the race. And I've started to see there are a couple of areas where it looks strong, but we've also got some big risk points. Horse hasn't had a good race for over a year and a half. Hasn't won a race for over a year and a half. It's coming in the bottom end of the Monte Carlo simulations. So we got a number of potential issues here, but there is still a possibility. Now, this race, if you remember, this 510, this is the 510 at Kilbeggan, is a 3-mile race. There are 8 runners in it. It's a hurdle race with 11,500 prize money on good to yielding ground, which is very similar to good to soft. So looking down, we got a couple of higher class races here, 53 lengths behind, 9 lengths behind, 58 lengths behind, 4.5 lengths behind. A lot of issues potentially there. Looking at the distance, are there actually any good races at a similar distance? And the answer there is no. Not a single good race at a similar distance. What about similar ground conditions? No. Not a single good race on similar ground conditions. Now, the horse is only carrying today 10-12. So it is dropping quite a lot of weight. We got 11-7, 11-7. But here, we still had less weight, beaten 53 lengths. So while there may be value for this horse, there are a lot of concerns. The last time this horse was competitive was the 30th of September 2019. Last time this horse won was the 11th of September 2019. It did not fare well in 2020. Now, we're in a weird situation because 2020 was a bit of a weird year. I mean, let's be honest. 2020 was a bit of a weird year, and when horse racing started, everything was a bit odd, and there were races containing groups of horses that just didn't make logical sense. Okay? So there's a bit of forgiveness for 2020 that we kind of need to factor in here as well. But there is a lot of concern around this horse. Now I'm going to look at the odds. The one thing I haven't looked at yet is our probability, and it's sitting in the middle of the field. Meticulous at the highest, then wrong direction. So this horse is very much middle of the field. So what we're looking at here for risk is this horse has potential. There is some potential. In some areas, it could contend in the race. But there are a lot of flags. There are a lot of flags saying possibly we should be staying away. Okay, let's open. Let me just bring up Betfair for you. Here's the current race. Now, please note, there's only £2,643 matched on this particular race. Okay? Only £2,643 matched on this particular race. But we're going to take it. We're going to look at it. First of all, we see Meticulous is 1.99 in the market. Moving down to Sean Wilder here. Currently odds of 13 or 12 to 1. Now, what do we think? What do we think based on what we've seen? Do you think these odds of 13 is good? That represents a good return for the risk or a bad return for the risk? Just drop that now, right now, into the chat. If you're on YouTube over here, into that chat on YouTube. If you're on Facebook, drop it into the comments. Do you think that odds of 13s for Shanwala, based on what we've just seen comparative to the other runners in the race, based on the race conditions, is good? If you do, think that's a good rate of return for the risk we're having if we place this bet on the horse to win? Put a message in saying good. If you think it's bad, put a message in saying bad. Drop that message in now. While you're dropping those messages in, I'm going to come back and see any other chats. John, are your race cards only available to RA Pro members and not Launchpad? Yes, the race cards are only available to RA Pro members because Launchpad is specifically designed to get you started on a journey to profitable betting without any kind of complications when it comes to understanding new software and new tools. So it's designed to kind of get you out of the starting gate, get you profitable. Then when you're ready, moving into Race Advisor Pro, where we can look in more detail, more depth at other things. Chris, why do you not look at breeding? Don't forget, please, while I'm going through these questions, please drop in now into the chat, into the comments, depending on whether you're on Facebook or YouTube. Drop that in now if you think odds of 13 for Shamwala represent a good return for the risk of betting this horse to win or not. Put good or bad, yes or no. It doesn't matter. Just put it in there. Chris, why do you not check out breeding to see if the conditions are also possible? They might not have exposed potential yet. Great question, Chris. And that's because personally, I don't really use breeding. And that's just a personal thing. That's not to say, of course, it doesn't work and it's not effective under various conditions. That's just to say, for me, I find that I put too much weight on breeding when I use it in my analysis. So that's why I tend not to. And that's purely the only reason, which is why it's so important for us to find our own ways. Raoul thinks Meticulous could be a horse for contention. Why would you think that, Raoul? What would be the reason for that? Okay, so here we're getting no, not a place, bad. John saying, I think the market has it right, Meticulous or face the odds. Paul Robinson, no, absolutely not. This is a 50-1 shot. Carl, what are the odds to lay it? No, but Bet365 are offering 18-1. Frank is saying Bet365 are offering 18-1. Massive difference. This is why you should always search across different bookmakers. Cindy Kinsella, John, I've understood, but other race cards to analyze FMFR are not as detailed. The Racing Post have race cards. I would like to say that there are no race cards that are as detailed as Race Advisor Pro, because we put so much information. We have so many factors and analysis. That's one of our USPs, our unique points, is that we have factors that cover every angle of a horse's performance. Cindy, are you recording this so we can watch it later? Cindy, this will stay on Facebook. It will stay on YouTube, so you can join in later. Yeah, absolutely. Cindy is saying bad. Paul, wouldn't you need to compare to each horse to see if its value on its own? How can you tell? This is a great question, Paul. This is a really, really good question. Thank you for asking this. Wouldn't you need to compare each horse to see if its value on its own? How can you tell? And what Paul is saying here, don't we need to look at Shamwala to Meticulous, and then look at Shamwala to Face the Odds, and then look at Shamwala to Wrong Direction? And the answer is no, we don't. Not to get an idea of the risk that we are placing on the horse, because and I did this on Race Advisor Pro race cards, because obviously that's our software at the Race Advisor. But also, I obviously know those ratings very well. I understand them inside out. I know what they're telling me. So for me, when I look at a race card, and for other Race Advisor Pro members, when they look at a race card with our factors, our ratings that they understand, they know how they work. We're not shy. I'm not shy about saying how our ratings are calculated. I don't show the exact formulas, but I'm happy to tell our members exactly what goes into them and what they contain. And because of that, they understand how they work. They understand how they compare to other horses in their creation. So when they're looking at them on a race card, when you're looking at them on a race card like I just did, I understand what it means, how they compare. This is one of the problems when you use race cards with ratings, that you don't know how they're made. You can't do this direct comparison on the race card. You can't do this direct comparison on the race card, which you need to be able to do, like you said, Paul. But when you understand how the ratings you're using are made, what they contain, then you don't need to try and compare every single horse pair. which becomes overwhelming. It's too much information. And when you try and do every pairing, usually that's too much information for most of us to hold in our heads, even to hold on a piece of paper. You'll end up taking 1, 2, 3 hours to do a single race, and you don't need to do that. Paul, talking Bree, can your kids run as fast as you? Are they the same build? Actually, I think my children, certainly my son, is going to be about 8 times taller than me. I'll come back to that when they're a bit older. Okay. Right, let's jump back there. So the general consensus was Shamwala does not represent a good return for the risk here. Now, we've only had an extra, I can't remember what it is, it's about an extra $5 or something come in matched on here. So this market is going to change quite massively over the coming hours. We've only got this just matched here. And that's absolutely fine. So we're saying, and I agree, for me, this does not represent value. But the lay side is currently 65, which also does not represent value. Let's look at the place market. The place market is not formed yet. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to jump over to Betfair Sportsbook, just so we've got some numbers that make a bit more sense. Let's come and look at all today's races. Kilbeggan 510. Okay, so we've got some numbers that just make it a little bit more sense here. Right. So down here we've got 14-1. Still not as good as that Bet365, Frank, but 14-1 nonetheless. Let's jump over to the place market. Okay. 15-8, 9-2, 10-11, 3, 2, and 4 places. So if we're looking at 15-8 in the 3-place market, now for those of you like me who are decimals, that's 2.88. That's 2.88. 15-8 is 2.88 in the place market. We can now ask ourselves the same question. Do we think that represents a good return for the risk? Personally, no, I don't think it does, actually. I wouldn't be happy with that. And what about 1.9 in the 4-place market, 10-11? That's 1.9 in the 4-place market. Does that represent a good risk, return for the risk? No. Very, very clear on that. However, 9-2 in the 2-place market, 5.5 in the 2-place market. I think the 2-place market is possibly getting a bit closer, but I still wouldn't use this horse as a selection because I don't think it's strong enough. So those are the two sides. Okay. So you've seen what we've done here is we've taken a horse that was a contender and we've looked at it. And I've actually gone to myself, does this horse represent a good return for the risk of me placing the bet? And the answer here is no. What I've also done is I'm looking at it and going, what about delay? And the answer is currently no, but the markets may change. The markets may change during the course of the day, and it may become good odds to risk. And the chances are, if the lay side of the market is good return, is going to be earlier in the day rather than later, because I'm expecting this horse to drift. Now, I'm expecting this horse to drift. And why are we expecting it to drift? You can see why we're expecting it to drift in the comments and the chats. Because none of us think it's value. So we're expecting this horse to drift. Then you could ask yourself, well, we're expecting this horse to drift. Is there a trading opportunity I'm happy to take here? Maybe a small lay and then try and trade it out pre-race higher. Maybe there's a swing trade potentially happening here. So you see, we've done one analysis. We've done one analysis. And there are so many ways now that we could look at it. Because we've done this analysis. And it clearly doesn't make sense for us based on risk versus return to bet this horse to win, to bet this horse to place. What about lay? Currently, possibly not, but maybe in the place market, there may be some potential. 1.9 in the 4-place market. It is only an 8-runner race. So for me, that's a bit close because it could come in that 4th position, despite not expecting it to come in 1, 2, 3. And possibly if it was 1.8, 1.7 in the 4-place market, I'd be happy to take that. Okay, so we're not happy there. What about, though, we're expecting this horse to drift because clearly these odds need to go higher. So maybe we can grab a swing trade on it. This is how we should be betting. This is stepping outside the box. This is taking that selection, that contender, I should say, that contender at the beginning of the day, taking that contender, figuring out what we think the risk is of this horse winning and losing, then looking at the odds available and going, is there a market? Is there a market where the return makes sense to place a bet on the horse? Because once we've analyzed the risk, we can look at all markets because we know the risk that we think the horse has of winning and losing. Now we can analyze all markets to determine whether there is some way to bet on this horse. And for me, personally, in this race, if I was going to be placing a bet on this horse, the way I would be placing it would be I'd probably be going for a swing trade in the win market. Lay now, expecting it to drift. That's probably how I'll be looking at it. Okay. Any questions on that? Drop those into the chat right now. I'm going to come over to the chat. I'm going to answer those questions. I'm going to have a quick conversation about big portfolios of systems, how they work, why they're different, and then we'll wrap it up for today. If you don't understand a bet type, don't do it. I should say that right now. If you do not understand a bet type, then do not do it. If you don't understand lay betting, don't do it. You might want to go and learn about it. That's different. Go and learn about it, but don't do it today, tomorrow, until you are confident you understand it. And when you first start using it, do it to pennies. If you're not confident trading, if you're not confident trading, if you don't understand trading, don't do it. Okay? Don't do it. Stick with what you are comfortable with. You don't need to push outside it. If you're not comfortable with different bet types, it's fine. If you only are comfortable with back to win, back to place, that is absolutely fine. In this race, we'd move on. We move on. That's not a problem. And like John was saying, he's got lots of selections, lots of contenders. How does he get through them all? Let's look at that. Today, I have 61 contenders. I have 61 contenders today. Okay, so how does this work? How do portfolios work? Now, there'll be a threshold, and this depends on your personal time. This is a very personal situation. There will be a threshold of how many contenders you can look at in a day, and that will depend on whether you've got 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, or the whole day. You know, half a day, whatever it is, doesn't matter. But how many contenders you can look at in a day is going to depend very much on your time and your availability. So if you have a lot of processes, and I'd like to talk here about, you've got two choices here. You either do as many as you can, and that's fine. You just work through them in race order, and then you stop. Because when you bet like this, when you step outside that box, when you start doing it like this, which is different to how basically everybody else tells you to do it, when you do it like this, you get rid of that panic, you get rid of that fear. You get rid of that fear that I've got to follow this horse because it might win. I've got to follow this horse because it might win. I've got to follow this horse because it might win. Because we're not looking for winners. We're no longer looking for winners. Yes, we want winners to win. Obviously, we want winners because that's where our profit comes. But that's not what we're actually looking for. We're not looking for winners anymore. We're looking to determine what risk a horse poses to us when we place a bet and whether the potential return is worth it. We know this particular horse may not win, but we know that the potential return is worth the bet. We know that actually over this week, we might place 30 bets and 16 of them may not win. 26 of them may not win. Hey, it may suck. I get that. That may suck, but we know that may happen. And that's okay. That's okay. Because every time we place a bet, we know the return was worth the risk. And 26 may lose this week, but next week we may win 20. Or next month. It doesn't matter. The timing doesn't matter. That's why we got to look at horse racing as an investment yearly, like you would any other investment. Week to week, month to month, things change. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. Things change month to month. We have to look at it yearly. We have to look at it long term. We know that. We know that. If you start looking at horse racing weekly, daily, weekly, monthly, you're going to stop winning. You're going to stop your ability to have a chance to make a profit because it's a long-term investment. The race may be short. Your bankroll investment has to be long. Have to look at it on the long term. You got to get through the downwards. You got to get through the downward swings to get to the upward swings. You have to do that. So that's one option, because when you do that, it doesn't matter if you miss a few horses. It doesn't matter if you can only look at 10 today and you've got 50 selections. It doesn't matter if you can look at 30 one day, 3 the next day. It doesn't matter. Because every time you are placing a bet, the return is worth the risk. You'll have an advantage. That's what matters. So that's one way of dealing with the large portfolio. The other way is the systematic processes. Like I said, I know someone that has 400, I think it's 500 actually, 500 systems that they follow. Now, generally speaking, when you have a portfolio of a large amount of systems, each of these systems is only going to find very few selections each day. Now, in John's case today, I think he's probably got about 1.2 selections per system as it happens. But I bet, John, let us know in the chat. But I bet you get days from those 40 systems where you get very, very few selections as well. Okay, so and that's how portfolios work. Large portfolios of systems where you got 400, 500. And when you are running portfolios like that, systematic portfolios like that, where there is no human analysis, you must be aware that the advantage in them is small. And as someone mentioned in the chat earlier, small advantages get eroded very quickly. And when you run systems like that, when you run portfolios of hundreds of systems, you do not have the ability to manually intervene. But instead, because don't make the mistake that it's easier or quicker. It's not. It's definitely, I would actually say it's harder and requires more time. Because actually your job becomes managing that portfolio. You've got to check that your systems are still performing as expected over monthly, quarterly, bi-yearly, 6 monthly and yearly. You got to make sure that performance is still as expected. You got to monitor that downswings, losing streaks are as expected. Any that are losing their advantage, you have to remove them. You need to be continuously making new ones to put them into the portfolio to replace any that are getting lost. And then, of course, you've got the job of placing the bets as well. It's a different type of betting, and it can work just as well. But the emphasis is in a different place. Your time, your work is in a different place. That doesn't mean it's better. It doesn't mean it's worse. It's horses for courses, as they say. That will suit some people and not others. But for most bettors, for most horse racing fans, it is far, far, far quicker to become profitable using the analysis process I've just shown you. Far, far quicker. And that is something that is not understood by generally. But that doesn't mean just because John has 40 systems, he's got too many. That's the way he works. That's the way he's structured his betting. That's his preference. There is no, you need to necessarily remove some or get some. John will be monitoring those, I'm absolutely sure. John will be monitoring them for their performances. Well, I actually know because John's an RA Pro member, so I know John is monitoring them. He monitors them very carefully. He knows he doesn't come to conclusions too quickly until he's got enough selections, until there's enough data. It is all done in that I would say administrative phase of monitoring his systems. Okay, so I just wanted to cover that there. Yeah, are there any more questions? Okay, there are a couple more questions. So if you've got a question, drop it in right now. Drop it in right now. I'm going to do the last questions now before we finish for this morning. Okay, here's a great question. Here we go. John. Talking of breeding, Paul Robinson. John, I use GGs, but even this design includes prize money, making it necessary to use class. It says, well, John, what can I say? I love Matt. I love Matt. But when you're ready, you can come over to Race Advisor Pro. just let me know. But on a serious note here, class Class, the reason John's saying this, is because class, I strongly advise you don't use class numbers to assess the class of a race, because class brackets are too broad. They're far too broad. Okay, they're far too broad. There are too many types of horses that run under the same class. Prize money is a far, far better approach. Coming down to the questions, what do you use? Here we go, Chris. What do you use to quantify the odds against risk being good or bad? Do you know what? This is a great question, Chris. What do I use? So there are a number of things that you can use, but actually, I honestly recommend you use your gut. I recommend you use your gut experience. Now, if you haven't got experience, let me just come back here. Let me hide this for now. If you haven't got the experience yet, let me bring that back up. If you've not got the experience yet, that's absolutely fine. But I honestly recommend this is something you practice, because this is profitable betting. What you've put here, Chris, quantifying odds against risk as good or bad, that we could actually say that and frame that as the definition of profitable betting. That, what you've put there in very succinctly, is profitable betting defined. So actually, if you want to bet profitably long term, learning this is the best thing you could ever do. And it doesn't have to be difficult. And when you're learning, the best thing to go with is your gut. Because actually everybody is slightly different here. And we're not talking about risk versus return down to the last penny. We're not talking about that. And everybody is slightly different. Okay. And this risk is a gut feeling. What is it to you? Only you know that. Do you think the risk of placing a bet on this horse, do you think the risk of placing a bet on this horse is worth the return? And you will have a different opinion to me sometimes, you know, and your opinion will be different to someone else's sometimes. But that doesn't mean that you are wrong and I'm right. And this is the weird and complicated world of mathematics, because nobody truly knows. Nobody truly knows what a horse's chance of winning a race is. Nobody truly knows that number. Okay. So we have to look at it long term. This is why we have to look at things over a year. We have to look at it long term. Because over the course of the year, if we differed on our opinions, sometimes you'd be right, sometimes I'd be right. You know, it would all mix and match. But over the course of a year, we get it right. Sometimes we get it wrong. Sometimes it levels out. We end up above. Okay, I hope that answers that question. But honestly, go with your first feeling and don't second guess that feeling. And then when you've got 100 selections under your belt, go back through it and see where you thought it was right, it was wrong, where you got it right, where you got it wrong. Looking at where you think you got it wrong will progress your profit much faster than anything else. Coming down here. Raoul, which horse would you say for a back to win bet in this race? So in this race, because I only looked at that contender, Raoul, I don't know. I would not be betting in this race, apart from how I said I might consider a swing trade on Shamwala. But Shamwala, was it? I think it was Shamwala. Yeah, Shamwala. So I might consider a swing trade, but I haven't looked at the other horses because they weren't flagged to me as contenders. So I didn't dig into them in enough detail to determine whether the risk would be worth the bet. And that's what I mean by not trying to focus on a particular bet type. We don't want to focus on that bet type. We don't want to find a horse to back to win. We want to find a horse where the return in one of the markets makes sense to us. And the risk of that return, the risk of the horse losing versus that return makes sense to us, to you. That's what we are looking for. We're not looking for a horse to back to win. We're looking to understand the risk of placing a bet on a horse. And then we can decide whether the odds, whether the return we get, should that bet come true, is worth it. Okay. Right, I'm going to draw to a close there as we've got no more questions. If you think of a question, drop it in underneath this video at any time. Drop it in. This video is going to stay up on YouTube. It's going to stay up on Facebook. Drop it in. If you've enjoyed this live stream today, please do hit that like button. And if you want to become a Race Advisor Pro member, please go to raceadvisor.co.uk/join. I know there's been a few questions about Launchpad. Launchpad will be reopening in a few weeks for new members. It will obviously be at a higher price than when we got our pre-release launching, but Launchpad will be opening. I'll let you know via email. If you're not on the newsletter, head to raceadvisor.co.uk. You can join the newsletter over there. Otherwise, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the weather this week. It's going to be glorious, I believe. Have a wonderful week. Keep safe. I will be doing a stream for Royal Ascot on Friday. So please do keep an eye on your emails, keep an eye on the Facebook page, because I want to ask you which race we should look at on Friday for Saturday's Royal Ascot meeting. Okay, I want to ask you which of the 3 major races. I'd love you to tell me which race you would like me to look at. So keep an eye out for that. Let me know, and I will see you back on Friday. It's going to be probably 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock in the morning. I'm not yet confirmed, but it'll be 10 or 11 in the morning Friday. I hope you can join me to go in depth into one of the feature races happening Saturday. I will see you there. Have a wonderful week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I look forward to seeing